They call it Kolat Cycle. In the language of the Mansi people, it means dead mountain. Long before 9 hikers died on its slope in 1959, locals avoided it, saying the place was wrong in a way that didn't fit into maps or weather reports. Officially, the Dyatlov Pass incident has been explained now: an avalanche, strong katabatic winds, bad luck on a cold night. Prosecutors reopened the case in 2019 and announced that a slab of snow had crashed into the tent, forcing the hikers to flee into the darkness, where hypothermia and injuries finished what the mountain had started. OAI_citation 1 https://n.wikipedia.org/wiki/Dyatlov_pass_incident UTM_source=chat.com. It's neat. It's tidy. It's also not why I went up there. My name is Alexei. I work for the Emergencies Ministry now, but I grew up on stories of that camp, of the tent slashed open from the inside, of bare footprints leading calmly away into the night, of bodies found half-dressed beneath a cedar tree and in a ravine, some with crushed ribs and fractured skulls but almost no external wounds. OAI_citation 2 https://n.wikipedia.org/wiki/Dyatlov_pass_incident UTM_source=chat.com. My father was a mountain guide. He used to say there are places in the Urals where the compass spins and the wind sounds like someone whispering in your own voice. He'd laugh when he said it, but his hands would tighten on his tea glass. Dead Mountain, he told me once, is one of those places. The snow there remembers. When the new investigation opened, they needed people who could handle both a rope and a laptop. I volunteered. They sent us with a clear brief: collect fresh measurements of the terrain and snowpack, reconstruct the likely avalanche scenario, and film some footage for the press to show that the state, at last, had an answer. We had satellite models, drone images, and a 2021 paper from European scientists showing how a small slab avalanche could match the injuries. OAI_citation 3 Nature https://www.nature.com/articles/s43247-020-00081-8 UTM_source=chat.com. We also had the original case files, declassified, scanned, and printed out for us to read on the long train north. That's where I first saw her handwriting. The diaries of the Dyatlov group are famous now. You can find their pages on the internet, their last photos colorized and captioned by strangers. Back then, in the archive carriage of our train, they were just stiff, yellowed notebooks in a gray folder. The leader, Dyatlov himself, wrote in neat engineering script about distances, temperatures, routes. Others sketched jokes in the margins: snowmen with Communist Party pins, stupid songs about freezing toes. One kept showing up more than the others. Z, the archivist, had labeled her a student, like the rest. In the photos she smiled with the unbothered confidence of someone who has never truly been cold or hungry. On paper, her words were sharper. January 30th, 1959. *The wind sounds different here. Not louder. Closer. As if the mountain is breathing on the skin of the tent. January 31st. Igor insists we camp higher, on the open slope. Practice, he says. We need experience in harsh conditions. The others agree. I think the forest below is watching us leave, and is relieved. February 1st, last entry. We named the pass today. Dyatlov laughed and said it should be called Happy Pass, but the others didn't like that. I suggested Dead Mountain Pass and everyone cheered like it was a joke, but no one laughed afterward. The rest of the page was blank, except for a faint smear at the bottom where the pen had dragged as if something had bumped her hand. The official timeline says they pitched their tent that evening high on the eastern slope of Kolat Cycle. Sometime during the night, something made them cut their way out, barefoot or half-dressed, to walk down into the darkness. OAI_citation 4 https://n.wikipedia.org/wiki/Dyatlov_Pass_incident UTM_source equals chat.com. No one ever asked what it sounded like in that tent when they picked up the knife. I wanted to know. We reached the pass in late February, me, 2 other rescuers, a cameraman, and a prosecutor named Marina who had spent 10 years in windowless offices and did not appreciate being introduced to wind chill. The Urals in winter aren't dramatic like the Himalayas. They're older, worn down, like the spine of a buried animal. The trees thin, the sky lowers, and then suddenly you're on a plain of white that goes on forever until it drops off into nothing. From above, our drone showed us a scattering of rocks, the faint contours of the old tent site, the line of the ravine where 4 of the bodies had been found under 4 meters of snow, months after the first 5. OAI_citation 5 https://n.wikipedia.org/wiki/Dyatlov_Pass_incident UTM_source equals chat.com. On the ground, it just felt empty. We pitched our modern tent a little lower than the original site, partly out of respect, partly because none of us wanted to camp exactly where the 9 had once shivered and joked and died. As we worked, Marina dictated notes into a recorder, her breath fogging. Wind speed, 25 meters per second. Snow depth on the slope, between 70 and 90 centimeters. Slope angle 28 degrees. Consistent with possible slab avalanche. The words blurred into a bureaucratic murmur as the wind rose. I hammered in a snow stake and felt, for a moment, something like a pulse through the ground, a faint vibration under my boots, almost like the aftershock of distant artillery. I glanced up. The mountain loomed above, its ridgeline dull in the flat light. No sound but the wind. "Alexei," the cameraman called. "Hold that pose. It's good for B-roll." I forced a grin for the lens and raised the thumbs up. Later, when I saw the footage, there was a faint shadow behind me in one frame, something upright and thin against the snow, there and gone between frames. The editors said it was a compression glitch. Maybe they were right. We spent the first evening running simulations. In the glow of our tent's LED lamp, we placed little foam figures on a slope of packed snow and dropped blocks onto them to see how they'd fall. The idea was to demonstrate, visually, how a relatively small slab could break ribs, fracture skulls, and yet leave the skin mostly unmarked, just as the autopsy reports described. OAI_citation 6 https://n.wikipedia.org/wiki/Dyatlov_Pass_incident UTM_source equals chat.com. The cameraman filmed, sighing, while Marina narrated. You can see that even a small block, 20 centimeters thick but compacted, carries enough force. I should have been focusing on the physics. Instead, I kept glancing at the notebook on my knee. Z's diary. I had brought a photocopy, against orders. Officially, the originals were to stay locked in the archives. Unofficially, I had slipped the pages into my pack because it felt wrong to walk into that wind without her words. When the others finally crawled into their sleeping bags, muttering about frostbite and warm hotels, I stayed awake. The tent creaked around me. Outside, the wind slid its fingers along the fabric, testing the seams. I turned to the last page again. Dead Mountain Pass, she had written. The ink had blotted slightly at the curl of the D, as if the pen had hesitated. Below that, where the page had once been blank, there was a faint impression, writing that had been scribbled furiously and then torn out. The pressure had left scars in the paper. I tilted the notebook, letting the lamplight graze the surface. Lines appeared. Not full words. Just scratches, half-formed letters. Enough to suggest the movement of a hand writing fast in the dark. Without thinking, I took a pencil and began to shade lightly across the page, letting the graphite pick up the indentations. Slowly, something emerged. "It's in the..." The line broke. Below it, harder. Asterisk not wind. Not avalanche. It wants asterisk. The rest dissolved into gouges. My mouth had gone dry. I told myself I was seeing what I wanted to see. The human brain finds patterns in clouds, faces in tree bark, messages in random noise. Behind me, the wind shifted. It dropped, suddenly, from a roar to a low, pulsing hum, as if someone had placed a giant hand over the top of the tent. In the silence that followed, I heard it. A thin, distant sound. Not the crack of snow slabs. Not the rumble of a slide. Footsteps. Bare feet on packed snow, just outside the tent. The human ear is good at telling footsteps from other noises. There's a rhythm, a weight, a pattern of crunch and pause. These were slow. Deliberate. Crunch. Pause. Crunch. I turned off the lamp. Darkness dropped into the tent like a stone. My eyes adjusted just enough to see the faint line of the zipper, glowing weakly from the snowlight outside. Crunch. Closer now. Someone stopped just beside my head, where the fabric billowed with my breath. Every rational part of my mind shouted at me, "It's the wind. It's the fly sheet flapping. It's your own heartbeat." My hand drifted toward the knife on my belt. The silhouette of a hand pressed against the tent. 5 fingers. Long, spread wide. No glove. Just skin, dark against the pale. It stayed there for a long, slow breath. Then another hand. On the other side of my head. As if someone were about to tear the tent open. I thought of the original canvas, found with long slashes from the inside, as if the hikers had fled something within that was worse than the storm without. OAI_citation 7 https://n.wikipedia.org/wiki/Dyatlov_Pass_incident UTM_source=chat.com. But what if the first cut had come from outside? The diary on my lap felt hot. Or maybe that was my skin. "Alexei," a voice whispered through the fabric. My father's voice. I nearly answered. My throat squeezed around his name. But my father had died 3 years earlier, lungs chewed up by cigarettes and mountain air. The hand on the tent flexed. Snow fell in soft clumps from the roof. "Alexei," the voice repeated, a little clearer. "Come out. You want to see, don't you? That's why you came. To see what they saw." Behind the familiar tones, there was something else, a resonance, like many other voices layered faintly underneath, out of sync. I gripped the knife so hard my knuckles ached. Every training I had ever had told me not to move. To stay sheltered. To wait for daylight. The diaries told me the same thing in reverse. They had left. They had stepped out into 30 below, half-dressed, some barefoot, walking not running, down toward the tree line. The tracks showed no signs of panic. OAI_citation 8 https://n.wikipedia.org/wiki/Dyatlov_Pass_incident UTM_source=chat.com. Something had convinced them that the inside of the tent was more dangerous than the night. "Come see," the voice coaxed. The knife slipped in my sweaty hand. The zipper twitched. And then Marina snored. A loud, ugly, human sound from the far end of the tent. The hand vanished. The pressure lifted. The wind returned in a gust that shook the walls, rattling the poles. Outside, whatever had been there moved away through the snow with a series of quick, receding crunches, swallowed by the blizzard. I lay in the dark, heart hammering, until the pale gray of morning seeped through the fabric. When I finally dared to unzip the entrance and stick my head out, there was nothing but drifted snow. No footprints. The wind had erased everything. Day 2 was all science and filming. We measured the slope, dug pits, analyzed the layers of snow to show how a weak base could collapse under a new heavy load, sending a slab sliding down just enough to crush a tent pitched unwisely on its path. We took drone shots of the ravine and posed by the memorial stone that bears the names of the dead. On camera, I explained how a small avalanche in hypothermia could account for the scattered bodies and missing clothing. Paradoxical undressing, I said, and the desperate sharing of garments among freezing friends. OAI_citation 9 https://n.wikipedia.org/wiki/Dyatlov_Pass_incident UTM_source=chat.com. I said all the right words. Marina watched from behind the cameraman, arms folded, her expression unreadable. When we finished, she pulled me aside. "You look like a man who didn't sleep," she said. "Wind was loud," I replied. "The wind is always loud here," she said. "That's not what I asked." I hesitated, then told her. "Not everything, just the hand on the tent," the voice stealing my father's tone. I left out the diary shading and the half-scratched words. I expected her to laugh. Instead, she nodded slowly. "You're not the first," she said. "The first what?" I asked. "The first to hear voices on this slope," she said. "Some of the original investigators did too. It's in Ivanov's notes, the ones they didn't include in the files they sent to Moscow. He wrote that the wind at Dead Mountain speaks in familiar tones and that his men had dreams of relatives calling them outside. The colonel told him to remove that from the official report, of course. OAI_citation 10 https://n.wikipedia.org/wiki/Dyatlov_Pass_incident UTM_source=chat.com. "Why didn't you tell me?" I demanded. "Because I didn't want you to expect it," she said simply. "Expectation makes ghosts where there are none. If you heard it anyway." She shrugged. "Maybe it's just infrasound," she went on. "Low frequencies from the wind. They can make people feel afraid, see things. Some scientist wrote about that. Or maybe the mountain doesn't like microphones and cameras," I said. She smiled thinly. "Finish the job," she said. "Then we leave. Whatever else, this place has taken enough people who wanted answers." That afternoon, we hiked down to the treeline, retracing the last steps of the Dyatlov group. The snow was deep, even with modern gear. I imagined doing this at night, in weak felt boots or socks, with a cutting wind at your back and dark trees below. At the edge of the forest, we found the cedar, a huge Siberian pine, its lower branches broken even after decades, as if something had once climbed desperately, trying to see the tent above. This was where searchers had found the first two bodies, stripped to their underwear, skin burned with frost, traces of a small fire between them. OAI_citation 11 https://n.wikipedia.org/wiki/Dyatlov_Pass_incident UTM_source=chat.com. We stood there in our insulated suits, warm under layers, and shivered anyway. The cameraman filmed the tree. I walked around it, feeling the snow give way in softer pockets where the ground dipped. Not far away, the ravine yawned, shallow now, but once filled with 4 meters of snow. It hid the last 4 bodies for months, 2 with crushed chests, 1 with a smashed skull, 1 missing tongue and eyes, face eaten perhaps by water and animals. OAI_citation 12 https://n.wikipedia.org/wiki/Dyatlov_Pass_incident UTM_source=chat.com. Our models said they had dug a snow den there, trying to shelter, and that the roof had collapsed on them, causing those injuries. It fit. It made sense. Sense is comforting. It also felt thin. As if there was another layer of explanation just beneath it, compacted like an icy crust over deeper, softer snow. "Alexei," Marina called. "Stay where we can see you." I realized I had drifted away from the group, following something. A feeling. A line. A path. In my mind's eye, I saw it, 9 sets of footprints moving away from the tent, down the slope, to this tree. Then 3 more sets, alone, struggling back up toward the shattered shelter above. Only 9, the original reports said. No other tracks. No strangers. OAI_citation 13 https://n.wikipedia.org/wiki/Dyatlov_Pass_incident UTM_source equals chat.com. But standing there, I felt sure I could sense a tenth. Not a track in the snow. A pattern in the air. As if something had walked just out of sight beside them, matching their steps, breathing in their ears, promising them that if they just kept moving, if they just kept following that calm inner voice, they would be safe. You want to see, don't you? That's why you came. That night, back in the tent, I didn't open the diary. I lay in my sleeping bag, eyes closed, listening. The wind howled. The fabric shuddered. Ice crystals slid down the poles with tiny ticks. At some point, between one gust and the next, the roaring dropped again to a low, pulsing silence. I counted my own breaths. 1, 2, 3. In the sixth breath, I heard another, superimposed. Not mine. Not Marina's snore, or the cameraman's coughing. A slow inhale. A slower exhale. Right beside my ear. Alexei, it whispered. Not my father this time. Not anyone I knew. A young woman's voice. Z's voice. Or what I imagined it might be. I wrote it down, she said softly. They tore the page out. They always tear the page out. My hand moved blindly toward the notebook, fingers fumbling for its edge. The paper felt warmer than my skin. They think it's avalanche, she went on. Storm. Wind. We heard those things too. But there was something underneath. What? I asked, without opening my mouth. You wouldn't have believed me, she said. You don't believe now. Silence stretched. Then. The mountain doesn't like to be measured, she whispered. It doesn't like its angles written down and its snow weighed. It doesn't like cameras. It doesn't like dossiers. It likes faith. I thought of them in their tent, young, cocky, earning their highest certification, trusting their training, their leader, their equipment. What did you see? I asked. Nothing, she said. That was the worst part. We saw nothing at all. Just a certainty. Like a thought that didn't belong to us. It said, out, it said, cut, it said, walk. Why did you listen? I whispered. Because it felt like our own idea, she replied. Snow slid off the side of the tent with a muffled thump, making me flinch. When we understood, she said, we were already too far from anything warm. Her voice frayed at the edges, thinning into the fabric. Tell them, she said. When you go back down. Tell them it's not just avalanches that kill. It's the way certain places can use your own thoughts as a knife. The wind came back in a roar, as if someone had lifted their hand off the mountain's mouth. I snapped fully awake, heart racing. The notebook lay closed under my hand. My pencil had rolled away, leaving a smear of graphite on the cover. I opened it with fingers that didn't feel entirely mine. The last page was as before. Dead Mountain Pass. Faint gouges. No words. I laughed once, sharply, at myself. In the morning, I would blame it all on infrasound and lack of sleep. In the morning, we would pack up, hike out, file our report, and give the press the avalanche they wanted. In the morning, the mountain would look like any other pile of snow and rock. But in the thin, gray hour before dawn, as we broke camp, I looked up at the slope where the old tent had once stood and saw them. 9 figures. For a moment, they were clear enough that I could see the patches on their jackets, the way one woman's hair blew loose from beneath her hat. They stood in a line, not looking at us. Looking past us. Down the mountain. Toward the forest. Toward the place where we would all, one day, walk out of our warm tents and our smart buildings and our data-driven models into a cold we didn't yet understand, following a voice that sounded exactly like our own. I blinked. They were gone. Only the wind moved, combing the snow in long white strokes. Back in the city, we gave them what they wanted. Marina's report was thorough and precise. It linked terrain measurements with weather records, snowpack analysis with computer models. It quoted the European scientists, the avalanche paper in a glossy journal, the new prosecutor's office statement that an avalanche most likely caused the deaths. OAI_citation 14 https://n.wikipedia.org/wiki/Dyatlov_pass_incident UTM_source=chat.com. The media called it closure. The families, or what was left of them, nodded, some with relief, some with doubt. On television, the animation showed cartoon hikers in a tent, cartoon snow sliding down, cartoon arrows explaining force and fracture. No one showed the part where the wind sounds like your father calling you outside, or your own voice telling you to get up, cut the wall, and walk. No one showed the notebooks. They stayed in their gray folders, lines of ink frozen just short of saying something no one wanted in an official file. Sometimes, when a new article appears online, has the Dyatlov mystery finally been solved? I click it. OAI_citation 15 history https://www.history.com/articles/Dyatlov Pass incident Soviet hiker death mystery UTM_source=chat.com. I scroll past the diagrams, the bullet points, the 10 eerie facts you didn't know. I read the comments from people thousands of kilometers away who think they would have done better, camped lower, tied a rope, stayed in the tent. You don't leave shelter in a storm, they write. It doesn't make sense. They're right. It doesn't. Unless the shelter itself starts whispering that it is the most dangerous place in the world. Unless your own mind turns against you, with the weight of something older and colder leaning on it from above. So when you watch this video and see the neat lines and the reconstructed path on the map, remember this. Some mysteries are not in what happened. 9 hikers died on a mountain. Snow moved. Bones broke. Bodies froze. The mystery is in why they chose to walk into it. And if you ever stand in a tent on a cold slope, wind pressing the walls in and out like lungs, and you suddenly know, without any sound, without any reason, that you have to cut your way out and go, right now, half-dressed, barefoot, into the dark. Ask who taught you that thought. Ask whose idea it really is. Because Dead Mountain is not the only place where the snow remembers. It's just one of the few where it left enough bodies behind for anyone to notice.